I've got it. Good.
Yep, there we are.
I think that worked. Good. I'm still very much a live show StreamYard novice. Actually, this is only the second that I've done. Katya kind of.
Yeah. Well, no, I've been on them, but I've never done one, so I have no idea. I don't know how to do it. I just know how to show up.
Exactly, me too. That's somehow I've always managed to leave it to other people, and
yes.
But this time, oh, is there anybody here? There may not be.
Is there anyone in the chat?
Anyone in the chat? Oh. There's a couple of people waiting, I know, but how would I'm trying to think, where can I?
Oh, so on the right, we've got comments.
Oh, yeah.
We got a comment from
Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Amelia.
Oh, I don't see. Wait a minute.
Hi,
Mehmet. Oh, there it is. Okay, I got it.
Oh, hi, Pat. Wow. Oh, that's lovely. So we're
hi, Amelia. Who else is here? Jenny. Mehmet.
Yeah. And one of the odd things is like, and I'll just say this to the people that have arrived so far, is that if you're in the Discord conversation, some people have a different name in that than what they have when they're on here. So if you're thinking, oh, I've been in this conversation, but they don't seem to know me, it's because we'll know you are as whatever you're called on in the Discord conversation.
On Discord. Yeah, that's true. Hi. That's super. So we've got quite a few people who commented on Discord as well, don't we?
I think so. Yeah, I'm wondering if everyone here is actually also in the Discord conversation. I hope so, because people will have so much to add as we talk about the book. Now we're like a couple of minutes past. Should we start talking about the book? And shall I sort of introduce the book to warm us up? So
I'll hold it up.
The only one with a copy.
Angelia, who is our honoured and special guest tonight, although it's lunchtime for her, has an actual physical copy of the book, which is good because mine went back to the library, and it's by Han Kang, so author from South Korea. She was born in 1970, and I think she's written 8 novels. She started with being a journalist and then did sort of poetry and some short stories, and then she's written 8 novels, only 5 of which are available in English, and this is the most recent, obviously. And she last year won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So, what a timely thing for us to read kind of early in our Reading the Globe fiction year. It's a novel that is in some ways representative of Han Kang's writing, except that every novel Han Kang writes is different, I think. But some of the things that the Nobel Prize, when it was awarded to her, that they said about her, it really kind of, I think, are really reflected in this book, and I think we'll kind of explore that in our conversation. But something about her sort of innovative style, combined with the ability to write about sort of quite harsh things in a very beautiful way. And I think that is sort of what I took away from this book, and I'm sure everyone had. But let's just say hello to hi, Constance. That's brilliant. Oh, and just seeing a note from a comment from Mehmet that the US cover is nicer than the UK one. Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah. I noticed that because a lot of times it's the opposite. I like the UK one better, but this one I actually like the US one better.
Yeah.
I think the UK one is very stylistic. It's just white with that yellow splodge. But I'm wondering, was the splodge, that scroll, is that supposed to be a tree trunk? I'm now wondering because I don't have a copy.
Yes, well, I mean, this one, it looks like snow and trees, which makes sense.
That is better.
Snow and trees. Oh, yes. Snow. It was one of the things I thought we're going to end up talking about, but I'll hide that for the minute. And I'm just going to ask people to put in the chat if they've read this book. Because it'd be good to know if people have read it, and we'll know if everyone says yes, I've read it. We can be less careful about spoilers, and if some people have read other Han Kang but haven't read this one, then we'll be a bit more careful. So do stick it in the chat if you have read it. While people are doing that, Angela and Katja, talk about your first impressions of the book.
Well, first impressions for me, I kind of thought this is a good side of the year to have read it because it's dark. March is still kind of like, we're still in that sort of like winter hangover. So thematically, it kind of fit for the time that we placed it in the read along. I wouldn't have wanted to read this book in the height of summer on a beach. It wouldn't, it would still be a very powerful book, but I think it would not have fitted the way that it did for this time of year. So the first thing I thought was, this is actually really timely. The next thing I thought was, I believed that I was going to have a lot of overlap, remembering another book about the Jeju massacre, which was written by historical fiction author Lisa C. And that's The Island of Sea Women. And I thought that was really going to come, across for me. And there's definitely the events that they talked about, but the style is so different that I actually didn't find that it came up as often as I thought it would.
It meant that I'd heard of the Jeju massacre because I'd read Island of the Sea Woman, but apart from that, there was very little, which I think was a good thing. I think we may have different feelings about the Lisa C book. We can come back to that later or another time, but I found that quite sentimental, and you can never say that about Han Kang, Angela, what about you?
I had not read the Lisa C book, and I was not aware of the Jeju massacre history either. So it was my first Han Kang book. So I started reading it, and I didn't get very far before I thought, wait, I need to read about Jeju Island. I need to look at a map. I need to see where this is, because she's, in the city, but she's talking about this island. And then so I got that, and then I read a little more, and then the massacre started coming in. I'm like, wait, I got to go do some more. So I kept having to depart and do some research. And then that really supported me reading the book. And it was my first book by this author. And I feel like the style is kind of what I expected from hearing people talk about her in reviews. But it was interesting later on in the Discord when people talked about the different books and their favorites or where they thought people should go next, and all that was pretty far flung. I mean, there was no consensus except that nobody thought The Vegetarian was the best one.
Although I think there are people out there that do. So
yeah, probably. But for this one though, it was, I don't know. It was, I don't know what I expected. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But I did. The background research was really important to me because I didn't know anything about the historical incident.
Yeah. Now, I've just been looking down the comments, and most people have either read the book, or there's a couple of people like Jenny and Pat that say, don't worry about spoilers. They haven't read it, but don't worry about spoilers. So we'll be fairly relaxed about that. So I was just going to say my first impression, literally in the first sort of page or so, was, oh no, she's starting with a dream sequence. And normally, if someone sticks a dream in a book, it's a bit of a thumbs down for me. I think, there's a lazy way of trying to convey something. But because it was Han Kang, and I've read all 4 of her other books that were available in English. I was sort of, no, I trust her. I'm going to hang on in there and not let this worry me. And actually, that dream becomes a recurring theme in the book. But the thing that I didn't know as I was reading it, that I was really struck to find out, is that that is a real dream that Han Kang herself, the author, had, that she had after writing one of her previous books, Human Acts, and it's a sort of, it's an autobiographical beginning to the book. And but then it diverges. This is not autofiction, you know, but my first impression was, oh, is this, you know, how autobiographical? Because then we heard about Migray. There are a few things that sounded like, oh yes, this sounds like Han Kang's life, but then it sort of slides away. Yeah.
So what's interesting is you mentioned Human Acts, and Human Acts is coming up in the comments quite a bit, and I've not read that one yet. So I'm definitely curious to read it.
Yeah. And I think the impact of writing Human Acts on Han Kang sort of was obviously very profound, and that at the beginning of the book, the narrator, or got to get her name right. Yeah, Kyung-ha.
How do you say it?
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's spelled Kyung-ha.
Kyung-ha.
Yeah, that she had written a similar book, and you know, but then Han Kang said that she intended to write a more sort of cheerful book next, but found herself writing this one.
I'll say that she failed on that.
Yeah, because she
that's really interesting. I wondered about that when the whole beginning of the book was about a woman who was basically haunted and devastated by her experience writing a book, and to where it apparently had left her alone in this world where I mean, she didn't explicitly say, but it sounded like perhaps there was a breakup or a divorce, like she was no longer with her family. She was haunted by her experience. She thought that the publication was going to alleviate it, and it did not help. And she's just that whole beginning. I thought, what it's in the darkness quotient. What am I getting into? Because she's trying to write out her will every day, and I thought, oh no.
Yes, yeah, it's quite an uneasy opening, isn't it, to a novel? I'm just going to quickly show Lindy's comment about the Lisa C novel. That was kind of how I felt about it, that it was a little bit, it sensationalized things, but you know, I knew Han Kang wouldn't do that, so yeah. So those were your first impressions. Then it kind of takes a strange twist. Yeah, we've had this, you know, woman that's a writer. She's struggling and she's having bad dreams, and then events sort of take off, don't they? With the call from Inseon from the hospital. What did you think about that hospital scene? Oh, we sit stunned.
Go ahead, Katja, you go first.
It's one of the ones that I haven't thought too deeply on, because it was a little bit surreal. There's a number of things that didn't feel real hospital to me, but equally, it was the sort of scene where you kind of go, well, actually, I don't think it's the point for me to be quibbling about what's you know, like the accuracy of the hospital room's depiction or the happenings, but yeah, just suspension of disbelief, I think it is.
Yeah. When I got to that scene, I thought, it did seem like a dream about going to see someone in the hospital, because at first I thought, why is there a specialty hospital that specializes in reattaching things? And what is the symbolism of this? And there was posters on the wall, like befores and afters. I thought, nobody does. And then I thought, well, what do I know about Korean hospitals? So I just, okay, I'm going to read on. And then last night I had to look it up. I avoided it because I thought I might get into something I don't want to see, but I looked up finger reattachments to see is this a thing where they were having to come in every 3 minutes and stick the needles in her connections, and it is not a thing. So
yeah,
that's just, I didn't think it was, but I thought this is just the weirdest. But again, it was so early in the book. I thought, okay, I'm just going to roll with it. I'll figure this out later, how this fits in. And I don't know if I did figure this out, but it was strange, and it made me question the reality of it. There was a lot of things that I questioned the reality of during this novel, but that was one of them.
yeah.
I like this question that just came up.
Oh, well, and just thinking about the pricking the finger, and it was described as having to do that to keep the nerves alive, that to stimulate the pain, to stimulate the nerves. And it felt, so if we were thinking, oh, this isn't actually something that you really have to do, then the symbolism of that has to be around, I don't know, keeping memories alive, like re-feeling the pain, so that it somehow that's necessary to and that relates to then what she does through the novel and what the novel does, doesn't it? But all the way through, I think there was real issues about what's real or what's not, and in the Discord chat, I think people had really different responses to how much they cared about that.
Right.
Yeah. I know. So like Erin, for example, said, she didn't think it mattered. She wasn't bothered by trying to think whether something was real or not. I think my brain, I do tend to sort of wonder about things, like, I'm trying to pin it down and then have to stop myself and say, like you said, Angelia, does it matter? Yeah.
Well, and I had to figure, does it matter? And am I missing something? Like, is there something where I'm supposed to know or not? But then it gets eventually in the story, even, what's her name again? Young Ha, she's trying to figure that out too. And then she kind of just says, well, and then, because they get so caught up in the story that they're sharing. But she tries to pin it down as well. Like, well, if you're drinking the hot drink and I can't drink the drink, then one of us, she's trying to put rules on what does it mean if you're a ghost or I'm a ghost, or are we alive? And I'm thinking, are there any rules? Who makes the rules? Does it matter?
Yeah. And I think it probably, in retrospect, I think probably it helps to approach the book not worrying about what's real and what isn't, and as you say, just kind of go with the flow, as you say. Oh, there we go. Melanie says, doesn't matter to me at all. Work of fiction. Yeah. And we're experiencing the world the authors created. Yeah. And so yes, the sort of the realness of the incidents or it, but there's a sort of I would have been worried if I felt the big themes, the story, the history wasn't real, and I never had any doubt about that. So,
right. Yeah, that was very concrete and very detailed, and
that's the bit that's real, isn't it? So, and the elements in the story of who's alive and who isn't, and who's a ghost and what's a dream, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter at all.
I was actually thinking, when we're talking about, how easy or difficult it is to accept whether it's reality, for me, it doesn't matter if it is or isn't, but it does leave you wondering to a certain extent how much you can rely on or not. And like you say, I can rely on the historical fact, but perhaps the blurring of that realism and the imagination is open to interpretation, because we have to wonder, is this her way of dealing with things? And Amelia, who has put a comment in there, and I'm hoping we're okay to talk about spoilers, are we?
Yeah, I think all the comments people have said, if they haven't read it, they don't mind about spoilers. So, and in a way, it's not the kind of, to be fair, it's not the kind of book where
you can really spoil.
You can really spoil.
No, because nobody even has the same interpretation of what there was. There's a historical story that's indisputable, and then there's these surreal elements about the women and their conversation, and there's a
Yeah. So for me, it was that question of the blurring of the lines. And I was like, okay, well, everything is really blurred, and I can be skeptical of certain things happening, like she's traveling on the bus, and then suddenly she's, out in the snowstorm and, trying to make her way across to this bird and everything. And it wasn't until Amelia sort of took it one step further and she went, I'm skeptical whether she even had this friend. I was like, hang on. Ooh, see,
Yeah.
I was skeptical as to whether she took the journey, but did I ever question the existence of Incheon? No, I didn't. And
Yeah.
once she mentioned it, I was like, well, why not? We're already exploring the idea that to cope with the trauma, Kyung-ah, who's writing this, she might, need to dissociate and create a distance to approach the truths of what she went through. So when when Amelia said that, I was like, well, that, invites us as readers to consider like what aspects of the story might be a psychological construct, and that could even be the other character, which I hadn't thought of, and I kind of hope not, because I feel like that was a solid person who owned a bird, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So as Amelia said, you could think that the narrator never leaves her room, and all of it is just a way of being able to tell the story. But you don't have to think that, And Stacey says, it just doesn't matter, It's just layers upon layers, and it's a very layer upon layer book, isn't it? Like nested narratives, and which I love in a book. It's just yummy, isn't it? I'm just grabbing a few more comments here. Yes, Constance, like me, can't not think about what's real, but you can still enjoy it. That in itself becomes a pleasure, doesn't it? Melanie, yes, it did. I read Amelia's comment in the Discord after I finished it and thought, oh my goodness, I need to go back and have another look at the beginning, and I could totally see the point. A bit of me thought maybe that she actually died, the narrator actually died really early on in the book, and because she's sort of starving and she's really so anything is possible, but it doesn't matter. It's not the thing that that sort of is important in a way.
Well, one thing that came to my mind when I was looking back through the book last night, and because I got caught up in that, like, well, if she died, I thought, well, I'm flipping through and thinking, what if she's dead the whole time? Or what if she imagined the whole thing? Or what if she died right here in the snow? Or what if she died when she had the fever? And then I realized in the narrative of Inson's, when she's telling the story about her mother and her aunt, they spend years and years not knowing if the brother died or when he died. And it weighed on them trying to figure out what happened. And then they finally agree, okay, we're going to say this date was the date he probably died. And then it got thrown into question again when that man gave the community presentation and he said there was someone who escaped. And so I thought that seemed like it came back around to like our need to know, and I'm trying to figure it out. And then the story is all about these people who live for years not really knowing what happened and not receiving any acknowledgement that these things did happen, and they're just sort of having to live with it. So all that seemed to, I feel like she did it to us on purpose.
Yes. And interestingly, we're talking about the narrator as the main character and Incheon. She actually said in an interview she did about the book that Jung Sim, Incheon's mother, she considered her the true protagonist of the book.
Oh, yes.
Although we don't kind of really get to know her till quite, she pops in and out of the story, doesn't she? She, and she has dementia and so, but it again, a bit like Amelia's comment, that made me sort of rethink the book again. It's like, oh right, she thought that was the main character, and her, because she's the woman that she refuses to give up, and she refuses to stop mourning, and she refuses to stop loving all through her life, and keep and you know, there she was living on this little island, but she's digging into, you know, the past and finding, you know, she, when her daughter didn't even sort of know she was doing that for much of the time. So yeah, that again. So again and again, things can get flipped by a comment or about the book.
For me, I didn't feel that the mother was a main character. So it's interesting to know that the author felt that way.
Yeah.
For me, as a reader, I kind of felt like Han Kang was almost a co-protagonist in the book because she has herself echoing in both of the characters. So we've got in the first narrator, we've got in Kyung Ha, we've got the physical, you know, like the migraines and all of those things that she's dealing with. But equally, when we're talking about the archival work that Inseon was doing, her project that led to her injury and everything, and the way she first talks about Inseon's first project, which was around film, and she said she had these people who loved her style, but then when she changed the style, they were left a little bit floundering, which is kind of how we felt in Discord, comparing part 1 of the book with part 2. And so I think a lot of her stylistic choices are very intentional. But yes.
I agree. In fact, I was gonna maybe give us a chance to have some thoughts about the style and the structure, because yes, the structure of the book and the sort of changes in style in it that was controversial, I would say, in the group discussion that we had on Discord, because some people felt the second half of the book they were found it less engaging. I didn't feel that, I have to say. So there's a diversity of opinion. What about you, Angelia? What did you feel?
I guess it was interesting because I didn't know how much of the book was not about her trying to go and save a bird until I got there, you know, because it's marketed that way. Like a friend that she's lost touch with just wants her to go and save the bird. And while she's going, she's thinking about all these things. And like, well, no, that's not really what it's about. So, no, I think by the time I got to that point in the book, I was sort of letting go of, especially when I got to where she buried the bird, and then she laid down and thought, am I going to die here? And then there's this huge shift. And I guess what I thought was, this is why everyone makes a big deal about this author, because this is so weird and I'm completely disoriented, but I am completely engrossed at the same time. And I don't really know why, but I'm just totally into it.
Yeah.
I'm just picking up on a couple of comments here. Oh no, this was amendments I wanted. Saying that just going back to this sort of real or not, that like, yeah, there are bits that feel, I think one of the really interesting things about her style is that she can simultaneously write things that feel very concrete and very real and very vivid and realistic, whilst setting them in something that is quite, the opposite is quite sort of dreamy or uncertain. So, and we're going to have to talk about snow because it comes up so much, but like her descriptions of snow are so accurate and precise, and you know, the feeling of it, and when she's walking through it in the city,
getting into her socks and
yeah, really concrete, but simultaneously that very concrete, very realistic description is enormously symbolic. So she's always kind of got, that's her style, she's got these two things going on, I think. Yeah.
But just very quickly, that also made me think about some of the comparisons of the symbolism in this book and the white book that she's written, because she uses obviously the color white for a lot of, it's a very poetic style that she's got in the white book, but equally it does look at loss, and she reflects on expectations of her as someone who in her family was the hope. So white is for hope, white is also for loss, because her what would have been her older sister passed away, and so she had all of the hopes of the sister placed on her as well. And also despite not having known this older sister, she felt that she was always processing a sort of grief, like a family grief.
Yeah.
And that really came through this book as well. But this time it was a grief of the community. And so that symbolism of all of that snow and the way that she uses it too in that second part when they're reflecting on some of the historical, actual, happenings, but considering it from a family point of view with the children, where they talk about the snow sort of like covering up and hiding things, but then it all becomes apparent. So yeah, for me, that symbolism really came across a lot.
Yeah, I'm not going to ever forget the whole business about the snow covering the faces in the schoolyard. That's just ingrained, and they're looking for the family.
Yeah. And the way she uses, and we can talk about other sort of images she uses repeatedly in the book, but the snow is the one that sort of sticks with you most, I think, and sticks in your mind. But it's not, it doesn't mean one thing, does it? It's like it means, sometimes it's like covering things up and cloaking things and muffling things, so or acting as a barrier so you can't see things, or a barrier to causing you pain, or being a source of struggle, coldness. It suggests death, and then but at other times there's something sort of a sense of, sort of beauty and transience, and she talks about how snowflakes are formed, and how there's that feeling that nothing can be too bad because a snowflake can only get so big in the time it falls from the cloud to the earth. So it's not a one note use of imagery, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
The same thing with the birds, I guess.
Yes. Talk about the birds, actually, I do.
I don't know, the birds, that was, when you go back through it, you see a lot of things that on first pass you go, well, that's weird, like the hospital and the old lady at the bus stop. But it's the birds that really stopped me in my tracks that first time through, because the bird is not alive, and then it is. And I mean, it's like, in case I missed out on what was going on, it's like, hello. And it also, but when I looked back, I felt like it was more concrete. I mean, she laid down, she had a fever, she thought she was going to die possibly, and then she wakes up and she doesn't have a migraine anymore, and the days of stomach trouble that she always gets are not there. And there's a lot of clues. But then the bird, and of course the reappearance of her friend as well. But I don't know. Are birds also, did those appear in other books of hers? Like the white?
A bit in the White Book.
Probably.
I can't think of birds in the Vegetarian. Oh no, I didn't. Yeah, it hasn't been a sort of recurring thing that I associate with her, I suppose. But she packs so much into her books, she can't.
Yeah, I struggle a little bit with the birds, because there's two white birds.
Yeah.
One has already died.
Yeah.
And then there's another one, and they sometimes they can talk if they want to, but
yeah. Tazy, I think and sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Tazy, but she mentioned about how birds can be symbolic as messengers,
okay.
and or potentially perhaps like the soul, so. But I have to say that the thing that was a bit funny for me was that the birds are budgerigars, and like just in Britain, budgies are seen as this kind of, they're almost like a joke pet, like I don't know, people who keep budgies. It's not something people take terribly. I don't know, in literature you wouldn't use them as this really serious, meaningful kind of bird. So, but I just had to put that out my head.
For me, the bird was also a symbol of it's tricky because by picking something that is so small, to a certain extent, some people would be going, wow, she's putting herself through so much danger for something, tiny, but this is the companion of a friend. So if we tell ourselves this bird exists and her friend exists, then it kind of gives you the symbolism of hope. And so she is hoping to find it alive and well, and the extent that we will go to try and keep something alive. And also then it symbolizes the fragility of life, because in the back of her mind she keeps thinking, what if I'm too late? So for me that's sort of like the purpose of the bird. But I did get confused, I have to say. I was like, did I blink? How's this bird back?
Well, and the bird, this was another time that she was so concrete, because as a kid, we had, well, we call them parakeets here, but we've had those before. And what she said about their care was absolutely accurate, about how they have to have their water and their food, and their bodies are so, everything just goes right through them so fast that they cannot go a day without. Like if you had to leave your dog home alone for a day, it would still be alive the next day, but maybe not your bird. Yeah. So they are kind of very, it's very specific, their care like that. So, and she just kept doing that, where some things were so tangible, like the birds' food and the all the food and the hot beverages and the cooking and things like that and then I don't know. Yeah.
I was just saying, Constance was saying that it was talking about that blending of concrete details with sort of shifting reality, but also there's some was also saying about how that can be a cultural thing about birds being able to travel between the land of the living and the lands of the dead. So the fact that the bird comes back after it's died, perhaps that makes sense. And I've just had to stick up this quote from Mehmet, about how long do souls linger by the sides of their bodies? Do they really flutter away like some kind of bird? Is that what trembles the edges of the candle flame? And candles and flames and glowing things, they're another repeated theme, aren't they? And it's that the double-edged images again with those, because we get, like, it's a symbol of warmth and hope, isn't it? Often a flame and so on, but also like we get things that are white and things that are red, and the red is also blood, isn't it? And we get sort of that repeated too. So it's that white red sort of dichotomy and is there, and then within the use of candles and light and flame and is, again, there's that sort of double, so everything has more than one side.
It really does.
Mehmet's saying that one was a quote from Human Acts. Brilliant. I thought it seemed familiar, but I was thinking, but I couldn't remember where it was in this book, but that's because I've read Human Acts as well. And someone's saying going back to the beginning, or you could just do that at the end. But one of the things that I felt about her sort of intention with the latter part of the book, and that sort of going into a more sort of reportage sort of style with the sort of research, was that in a way, although it was a shift in tone, it was as if everything else had been building to that. So I didn't find it a disconcerting shift in tone. It felt like, and there was something that you actually said in the Discord, Katya, about that shift from the personal to the communal. So I don't know if you want to say more about that, but I really liked that, the way you described that. Oh, Katya, you've got muted.
Okay, well, that's good. I was just saying, let me scroll up to see if I've got notes on what I said in the Discord.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but that was your
the Discord. Now I'll try and remember. So for me, the part one was very much intimate and tied into Kyung-ha. We got her depression coming across, we got her migraines, we got her struggles with her authorial, how do you say that? The voice for her writing, because she talked about how the writing really liberated her to say certain things, but then there was also something she said she's never shared with others. So I found it interesting that she was actually still not entirely liberated as she was learning to write that. But that was a very personal story. And in some ways, we had to have that shift in the narrative style to this part two, because that then more reflected somehow in Sion's archival work. It got us to look at the community of that island and everything that everyone went through, but equally how by sort of like going into the communal, it allows people to process their individual grief, which comes back to something that Angelia had said just, like 10, 15 minutes ago, when we were talking about the history of Jeju, that this massacre was buried for so long and people were left unknowing. They didn't have details. And only now are sort of like people trying to look into what happened to individual people, and and that's allowing this communal healing to happen, and
Yeah.
individual, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and that does feel, for me, that felt like that was the big theme of the book, isn't it? That about sort of that those memories, that trauma remains, and those memories remain, and you can try and suppress them, but they have, it has to come to the surface again, and it has to be honored, and it has to be seen. Yeah, and that's what Han Kang is doing. Yeah.
Yep.
And she says that when she's writing a book, she has kind of like questions in her mind, and that she's working through those questions, not necessarily to find answers, but more like it's a sort of working through of questions. And she said, and I'm going to have to find where I've written it down, but something about that the world, how can the world be so painful and violent and also be so beautiful, is one of the is the question that she says she feels she's been working through in novel after novel. But then when she finished this one, she realized maybe the question she'd been thinking about was, to what extent can we love, and to what degree must we love to remain human? And I thought, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I think at the moment, Jeju is one of those huge holiday destinations. And so the fact that we're now thinking about things that happened there, and it's got a very, very fascinating, but also really tragic history going back, way back. And even before World War II, World War One, Jeju was a very poor place. And when you fell out of favor with the emperor, you would get exiled to places like Jeju. And I found that fascinating. So I know that a couple of people find the depiction of the massacre in the island of sea women leaning too much into sentimentality, and then that's disrespectful. But the historical accuracy of the first part of the book, before you even get into the massacre, where it talks about how, despite the sort of culture being quite misogynistic, because a lot of the exiled people were Confucian scholars, and therefore they believed that women shouldn't really be heard. They lived off their wives, and they were looking after the children as they waited for the women to arrive from the sea, sort of thing. So Jeju's history really comes alive from novels like this, and makes us see it as more than just a nice holiday destination, I think.
Yeah. I was interested by Melanie's question in the comment about what the impact the novel had in Korea when it was published there. I know Matilda mentioned in the Discord chat that the previous book that someone had attempted to write about the Jeju massacre in 1978, that person ended up arrested, but there'd been a shift, and by the time this was published, people were ready and willing for it to be spoken about. You know, politics had moved on, and but there is a whole, you know, South Korea there's a very sort of quite a lot of violence in the 20th century history, which up until relatively recently has been very much suppressed, talking about it. And in Human Acts, she's writing about events that happened in the 1980s that were also then, you know, people weren't allowed to talk about. So it's relatively recent so it's still in a way a brave thing for a novelist to be choosing to write about, I think. So
I think I read, when I was looking up that history, I believe I read this, that the U.S. has still not acknowledged their role, because and she doesn't get into it too much in the novel. She mentions American soldiers a couple of times, but apparently it was a pretty significant role, either being complicit or more, and it's certainly not something that's covered in American history class, or at least it wasn't when I was a kid and we would study what was going on leading up to the Korean War and the Americans' role in that. And so I was when I read the history of the place I hadn't heard of, I was very surprised to see the U.S. in the story, and that I had never heard of. So the fact that now it's 2025 and one of the players still isn't even admitting that they were a player. So it's both a long time ago and it's not, because it's just now being brought out into the light.
Yeah. Constance asked in the comment if it's would be good to be familiar with the events, perhaps like before reading the novel. In a way, I don't think although, you know, you were saying you were sort of Googling as you read, Angela, and I don't think you need to know any detail, because in a way that the way it's written, it emerges, and you know, you learn as you read, don't you? Yeah.
I think you do. I didn't know how much I was going to learn as I read, so I felt at the beginning I needed a little bit of footing about what I was going to read about, and then it turned out that the way she told it to me was much more informative, even in that personal level, in such a, I don't know, surreal setting and everything. I got more out of it than kind of the dry facts of, well, there was this conflict and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I guess that's also the point. It's about the generational trauma and the actual cost to these people and their parents and their grandparents.
So I would agree with you, because I hardly ever research historical events before reading a historical fiction novel. But what I do is let the historical fiction novel sort of like guide me looking for details, because it almost allows you to sort of like engage more with the narrative as it's, you know, unfolding. And I had that experience as well with the contemporary book, the first one that we started reading the Globe with Clean, because I didn't know much about the protests that took part. You know, it happened at the time that we're talking about, and it's all happening. And I had to look it up, and I found it fascinating. So I always feel like as I'm reading a book, it sort of like guides me to look into the aspects that I really want to expand on for my personal understanding. So, yeah.
Well, I love looking things up, so I'll use any excuse to stop.
Well, and Lindy's recommending that you read Ed Park. There you go. In Same Bed, Different Dreams, which I haven't read. So
Lindsay, I've got that book. I tried to start, and I got really confused because it's alternative histories, isn't it? And I got it because it is fragmented, like the second part of this book. So I kind of feel like I know why you're recommending it, but I have to revisit that one because I started and then I kind of, my mind went and I had to sort of like put it aside, and I thought I'll go for that.
Did it make that noise?
It felt that way. And I have to go read it again at a time when it's really quiet for me.
Yeah. And I think what that reminds us, and I'm just going back to a comment I flashed up earlier from Daisy about, you know, memories and trauma are the big themes. And although the book is specific to you know, that massacre, that period of conflict, that country, that, you know, those are actually quite universal themes, aren't they? So you know, there's the particular context that she's writing about, but that goes wiser. And she said when she accepted the Nobel Prize that it affected her ability to celebrate the fact of an awareness of what was going on in Gaza, what's going on in the Ukraine, or you know that. And I just have the feeling that she's someone who's just very, how to put it, you know, we all go around knowing there are all these dreadful things happening in the world and all these dreadful things that have happened in the world, and most of the time, in order to survive, we kind of blinker ourselves a bit, don't we? And Han Kang feels like an author that, you know, she takes her blinkers off and experiences it and writes about it, you know, for us to read. Yeah. Brave woman. Yeah. There's something that, another thing she said in an interview she did after she got the Nobel Prize was about the value of reading, which really interested me. And I've written it down, but she said that reading is a direct way to enter the heart of other humans. The boundaries of self can be more flexible. The ability to feel the interior of other people, even though they're far away and even though you don't know them personally. And I think that's what she does for me, I think, you know, which is why we choose to do Reading the Globe, isn't it? Because we, you know, it's about experiencing things other than things we know or things we've lived, but at the same time it gives us like little echoes, or, you know, helps us understand our own experience or our own country's history as well. Yeah.
Yep.
And absolutely, I think that's and that's why it was great that she won the Nobel Prize, I think. Yeah.
And I would say, you know, in the same way that you're talking about, sometimes, you know, we have those blinkers on to very differing degrees. And I think readers, for example, some readers wouldn't actually be open to reading something like this. You know, they'd shy away. I'm okay with reading painful historical facts, but I have to admit, you know, like sometimes the one book I can't see myself reading of hers is The Vegetarian, and that's because everyone just scared me. Everyone scared me because they're like body horror, and I was like, oh no, body horror! I get scared of body horror, so I've got a mental block instantly. Am I gonna get that? I haven't started. You're both on story 3 or 4, aren't you?
Yeah.
Of our next book.
Yeah. Do you want to just hold it up and name it, Angelia? Because it's the April book.
I'm trying to get. There's a glare. A sunny place for shady people by Mariana Enriquez, and translated by Megan McDowell. And it's horror short stories from Argentina.
Yeah.
Okay, so I picked a book that I knew that I was gonna really have to push myself with. So we'll see how I get on with this.
Well, I was doing okay, and then I read one this morning. It was a little much on the body horror.
Yeah.
Having said that, I read one of the International Booker ones, and it was just like shock value after shock value. They did it for a reason. It was the reservoir, and then excuse the language, reservoir bitches. Yeah. And like when I read the first story, I was like, the sun is, it's just shock value for shock value. And then as I read on, it got more and more, like gruesome and gory. But I sort of like became immune to it. And when we got to the last story, it sort of gives you an idea of why it had that sort of tone to it. And so I accepted it. So I might be okay. And maybe I should try the vegetarian.
Well, I read I know we're getting off the topic here, but I read a sample from that Reservoir Bitches on Libby because the description sounded really good, and the sample kind of turned me off. I was like, maybe not, but I don't know. Maybe I didn't give it a fair chance. I don't know.
Yeah. I was looking to see if anyone in the comments has read it and might say more. I think I wouldn't be put off reading The Vegetarian. I didn't like until someone else said, "Oh, what it is body horror." I didn't think of it like that. I thought of it as quite a political book, which politics with a small p, about women in Korean society and objectification and what you can control about your body and what's imposed on you. So it didn't. Body horror was not the predominant sort of theme for me. I mean, yeah. So don't be put off. I'm hoping that Sunny Place for Shady People, that what I will get from it, a bit like Clean, our first book, is that there's a sort of it's something about that was in a way about Chilean society and Chilean politics, but expressed through particular events in the novel. And so and I'm hoping that these stories, that I'll be somehow, in some sense, there'll be a bit of allegory there about what Argentina's like. I don't know, we shall see. I'm just looking. Amelia says she's read another collection and she wouldn't expect anything else from her. Oh, right. Yeah. And Melanie said, yes. Mehmet, rather, the Vegetarian, powerful critique, including some body horror elements of being a woman in modern Korea. Yeah, that's spot on, I think, absolutely. And a final comment from Tazy, Jeju Island is almost a character in this book. That's interesting. Increasingly so in the second half. You kind of get to know and understand the island more, don't you? Well, I'm conscious that we should start to wind up because we're getting close to the end of the hour. I was wanting to ask both of you if there was like a final thought or something that you haven't had a chance to say. So I can see Catches waving, so go for it.
Well, I was very naughtily Googling because I was like, we talked about white birds and different books of hers. Is it in The Vegetarian, which I've not read? So I very quickly Googled, and it says there is a white-eyed bird in her hand, the main character's hand at some point. The white-eyed bird with its missing feathers and bloodstains becomes the symbol of Junga's own body. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah? I don't. See, I didn't know, but there is a white bird in there, or white-eyed bird.
Yes, no, I'd forgotten that. And Angelia, any final thoughts from you about? Will you read more? This is your first Han Kang, unlike me and Katya. So, will you read more?
I will read more, and based on what people have said, I think Human Acts or Greek Lessons would both be possibly good ones for me. Mm-hmm. So I will probably try one of those sometime in the near future.
Greek Lessons is I think the least popular maybe of the 5 books that are available in English amongst a lot of people. I really loved it because it's about language and kind of isolation and connection and how we understand each other or not. It's got someone in it that's lost their voice and someone in it who's losing their sight, and
I enjoyed it. I'll definitely be picking up. I think first I'll go with Human Acts and then The Vegetarian, and then I'll have read them all, the ones that are translated, and then hopefully something else will be translated by that time. That would be good.
That would be good.
Because there's another I think there's another 3 of her novels that haven't been translated yet, but they're all earlier ones. All her more recent ones have been translated now, I think. Oh, I said at the beginning of this video, just before we went live, that I might start to cough, and it's happened. So
right at the end. So that was, it waited exactly for this time.
Wow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for a brilliant discussion. Thank you for all the discussion in the comments, which I've been reading, and you've been speaking to each other, which is great. I'm gonna have to go.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Roz has gone down.
Oh.